Is it possible not to experience immediate symptoms from trauma, but to go on to experience long-term symptoms?
That would be unusual. Like, anything is possible, but generally speaking, you would not necessarily go on to develop post-traumatic stress disorder without any, you may not have the acute stress response, but you're going to have something, because that's an indication that your brain is responding in an anxiety fashion to the trauma, right? Some of those first symptoms. And usually those, if you eventually go on to develop post-traumatic stress disorder, there was something that happened to you when you first experienced the trauma. Now, the difference is that it may not be continuous, meaning you were exposed to the trauma without you even realizing it. Your brain had some immediate response to it, and then it went into quiescence, and then those symptoms can reappear months later. So by definition, we wouldn't diagnose somebody with post-traumatic stress disorder unless it's been 6 months out from the trauma. Right? This is if the trauma is a single event. I'm going to explain why one of the biggest issues with October 7th is that it has not been a single event. But so you would wait about 6 months, and then you would see if there are symptoms. And there are some people, for example, this is a phenomena that occurred with Vietnam vets, where their symptoms kind of were in quiescence, really, for years. And then in the context of life issues, perhaps they came back from Vietnam, they got married, they had children, and then they lost a job or they got a divorce, and then all of a sudden, the trauma that they had, the response to the trauma that they had been suppressing, trying to suppress all these years, started coming out and manifesting as external symptoms that then brought them into treatment. So that happens. More often than not, though, the symptoms present within 6 months to a year after the trauma, generally speaking. One of the hardest parts about this particular trauma is that it's not a trauma. It is a very complex, multifocal crisis. You have what happened on October 7th itself, the massacre, beyond words, right? Beyond comprehension. Then subsequently, you've had the world's response to it, which even if we had just taken, which was not particularly as strong as it should have been considering what happened. Then you have the war that's going on in Israel with the associated missile attacks. And then you have this rise in anti-Semitism with marches, pro-Palestinian marches that have a very anti-Israel, anti-Semitic tone to them, all of which are more and more circles of trauma that extend the trauma, temporarily speaking, meaning the trauma hasn't ended. We're still in the trauma. There is still a war going on. There is still anti-Semitism being expressed on all levels. And the real concern, I think, for a lot of parents in America, I think as American Jews, I mean, and I'm an American Jew. I made Aliyah 3 years ago, but I still, see myself as an American, is once you've gone through this type of event and you see the response from your neighbors, from your classmates, from your teachers, how do you ever put this type of thing behind you? And how do you know when the trauma has ended? And I'm not sure how to answer that, but as a diagnostician and as a psychiatrist, this is something that I've been grappling with in my own mind. It is, how do we know when we start pivoting towards, okay, now we need to start healing, when the crisis is still so present and there doesn't seem to be kind of a timeline for it to end.